Like farmers and ranchers, our local timber companies are multi-generational businesses. We sat down with Bill and Bob Baker to learn about Baker Timber's products and their family's legacy.
We were born in New Underwood, not too far from here, so we're pretty much local product. We moved to Rapid City in early 60s, and my dad began working in the woods full-time at that point after he sold the place in New Underwood. At that time, started with the pulpwood industry, and we cut everything into 8-foot, 4-inch lengths, and we'd haul them down to the train tracks in Rapid, and then they would get loaded on train cars, and they'd be shipped to the lake states as a pulpwood, for making paper products. That's how we kind of started the whole Baker Timber products. We were involved at a pretty young age. When other kids were playing Little League baseball, we were going to the woods and working in some capacity. Dad always would figure out something for us to do out there. We'd start in the mornings all summer long and go out early, and back then it was chainsaws, tractors for skidding product around. I even skidded logs with a horse one summer. His name was Tug.
That's a good name.
Fitting, I guess. He probably knew more about skidding logs than I did at the time, because I was pretty young. But
I mean, you guys could be interviewing a senator or something like that, but you're down here with a little stump jumper and a cow kicker. Basically, my dad and uncle started on a part-time basis in the timber business, and they skidded with horses and cut trees down with a crosscut saw and limbed the trees with axes.
we were working in the woods since we were kids, you know, and one job or another. And Dad was pretty adamant about us all going to college, so we got our degrees and came back, and Bob and I ended up back in the family business. And my mom used to do all the books on a ledger and all by hand, and eventually we got into the computer age, and some of those old computers are almost laughable that we used, but they did serve their purpose at the time. And Bob's wife Rita and my wife Diane came into the business, and Diane actually worked at a local bank in town, but eventually came out here and helped with payroll and accounts receivable and all that stuff, and kept Rita and Diane very busy for a lot. They were a big part of this whole growing thing that Baker Timber Products went through. They're also trying to slow down a little bit, and so they're down to Rita's a couple days a week. My wife's a day a week, but they're still involved and help keep the business rolling.
And your son? Tell us about him.
My son, Tyler, is in Sioux Falls. He actually got married out here, and he proposed to his wife right over here on the edge of Spring Creek Canyon.
Really?
He told me he was going to, and asked me to take a table and a little chair and set it up over there with pick some wildflowers and a bottle of wine, and so they just went for a ride and hiked back there, and there it was. And so he proposed to her right there. They got married out here. I was honored and was the best man at my son's wedding, which was
That's really neat.
Cool. Both doing very well, and have 3 grandkids, Ryan, Sean, and Sydney. little girl, and doing great.
What's your favorite part of being a grandpa?
Oh, I love it when they come out here, and I was always glad to see Tyler and Melissa, but the kids are what's fun for me.
Right.
And so we've actually got a cabin in the hills, and we spend time at the cabin, and just love everything the hills has to offer, and we hike, we fish, we ride four-wheelers, and always have a blast with the little ones.
Of course. And you now have 2 children that are grown and...
Yes, my son Jack is a partner in Baker Timber and also at the ranch. And he does most of the day-to-day management as far as the timber end of things at Baker Timber, and a lot at the sawmill now. And daughter Kelly is a partner in the ranch, and but she's a respiratory therapist, and Jack and Val have 3 kids, and they live just west of the sawmill at Rockerville. And Kelly, and she's got a great guy friend, and Kelly's got 2 children, and they live right over here, half mile away on the ranch. So great help and great input from both Jack and Val.
Sure, definitely.
I want to mention Rita. She's been my buddy for, I think in August, it'll be 47 years.
Wow, congratulations.
That's the Buffalo Gap. This was all, basically the buffalo grounds, but that's where they'd roam in and out of the Black Hills, and then typically in the winter they'd stay in the hills just because less wind and less real inclement weather, and then they'd graze out here in the summertime. Come here, Rose. Come here. Come here. You know I don't have anything, don't you? Yeah. Okay. How about you, Oni? So you know every one of them, and they all have their individual little traits and so on.
You definitely, as a local business, create different bonds with the community. Do you have any stories that kind of stick out in your mind?
We donate our time to cut down the holiday tree, the Christmas tree for the Main Street Square, and we've done it every year that they've had it down there. It's always a fun project to do, especially that time of year. And they find the tree, and we cut it down, and the crane picks it up and lays it on our trailer, and we haul it down to Main Street Square, and the crane picks it up again and swings it over and sets it on the pedestal for it. So
it's amazing. It's a big tree every year.
Yeah. I remember hauling it down Jackson Boulevard and looking out the pickup window, and it's laying on its side, brushing the stoplights as we're going up.
Oh. Of course. Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't even have thought of that.
Yeah. It's that's always a fun project also.
Mm-hmm. You and your family have been very active in the community, and so what are some things that you've been involved in with your communities?
Long story, but the old rodeo grounds in Buffalo Gap got bought up and was tore down by a developer. But anyway, we had this piece of property up there. It's half mile east of Buffalo Gap. It's an old gravel quarry site, but it had about 3 or 4 acres of real flat ground, and I told a couple of the, what I'd call the neighborhood fathers, that I thought it'd be a good idea to put up a little rodeo and fairground type facility in Buffalo Gap. And they all agreed, and they said, where? And I said, well, I think this property of ours would fit. So we went and looked at it, and a couple weeks later, they called me into a town meeting, and they were all for it and wanted to buy it. And I said, I really don't want to sell it, but I'll give you $1 a year, long-term lease, 25 years, and all renewable. I'm not a huge rodeo guy or anything else, but it fits this community, and it fits the kids, and the kids are the future, and I don't want to sound corny, but that's the bottom line.
We have a unique situation. This virtually never happens, but we're actually putting up logs, processing logs, and whole tree chipping in the same landing. Processor here, the skidders in the background, and our chipper over here, whole tree chipping. We're chipping tops and stuff that don't make logs, and everything else goes to logs.
So one of the larger events in your family history was the fire, right? So can you tell me a little bit about what went down with that?
Ironically, I was actually not here. I was at a state wrestling tournament in Sioux Falls. It was 2003. And my wife called me and said, are you sitting down? And I said, well, I was. And said, the mill burnt down. And I'd watched one match. I knew there was nothing I could do, but I couldn't sit there. And so I watched one match and hopped in the car and drove home, and it was bad. It was total loss. It got so hot that it actually warped the tracks that our carriage runs on. And my brother and I thought about it for maybe a day, and this is what we do. So we scraped everything off and started over, rebuilding. We're kind of proud of the fact that we didn't lay anybody off or anything. We put everybody to work, rebuilding the mill, and it was probably burnt down in March, I believe, and by the end of the year, we pretty much had a mill that was pretty much ready to go. So,
with every tragedy comes some type of blessing or something that you've learned from it. What would be something that you took away from that?
Well, I always used to say I wouldn't recommend it in anybody's business plan, but we did learn a few things, and so we rebuilt it the way we thought we always should have, and so there were some improvements to be made. And a little better fireproofing. All our electrical is put in another room, and our housekeeping is really good. We sweep everything down every night, and just try to prevent anything like that from ever happening again, I guess.
Sure, of course. The industry that you work in, there's definitely a lot of challenges that you have to face. So what is it that kind of drives you and motivates you to want to keep fighting those fights and facing those challenges? What makes it worthwhile?
There's several things that come to mind. One is what we do, we feel is a good thing. We feel that by helping manage that forest out there, we love to be out there in the hills and doing recreating and enjoying the hills. And so we want to have that for future generations. And we just feel that we're doing the right thing by doing what we're doing, helping the Forest Service uses us as a tool, I'll say, to help manage the forest. And so that's part of it. The other part of it is, as I mentioned, we have guys that have worked for us for a long time. We know their families. We want to provide a job for those people, and so we want to keep it going, I'll say. We want to make good business decisions to keep that going it's for us too, but it's for them. You know, it's for the people that work here, it's for ourselves, our own families, and so over the years we've been punched in the gut a few times with a few things that have happened. The fire, you know, crazy fuel prices one year hurt us. Some of the things that go on with the Forest Service, fires and the bug epidemic out in the woods definitely affect our raw material supply. All those things are challenges, but like I said before, just our belief that we're doing the right thing and for the jobs that we're creating and kind of keeping things rolling for the community, we feel is the right thing.
It's a different day and a different age, but I feel blessed to grow up and be in where I am. I like to see a tree that needs to be harvested hit the ground and hauled into the mill, and a board or a cant or a 2-inch plank cut out of it. It all is still fun for me at the ranch here. I love a beautiful stand of alfalfa. I love baby calves. Love to feed light calves out in the fall and through the winter with homegrown silage and hay. So I guess I do it just, we're not what I'd call rich people or anything else, but we seem to keep adding a little bit of equity to our operation, and I like what I do. The Black Hills is blessed with ponderosa, and it's a very continuing type species. Ponderosa lends itself to thinning, where a lot of the fir forests in the west do better if you cut them all down and regrow them like a corn crop. Ponderosa does well in a staggered age stand, and wildlife and grazing and all this work hand in hand with a good ponderosa forest.
Right.
Eastern Montana, eastern Wyoming, eastern Colorado, a lot of ponderosa, and it's called bull pine in many areas, but it's ponderosa pine.
So if you had an opportunity to sit down with some of the public that knew very little about what goes on in our forests, what would you tell them, and how would you advocate for the timber industry?
Well, I guess our history, when you, in quite a few cases now, we're going over the same property for the third time, and the volume on that property is a higher class of timber and a larger volume of timber. How do you argue against that?
historically, before we were here, Mother Nature managed the forest through bug epidemics and wildfires, and we're kind of trying to mimic that to some degree. It's hard to let a forest fire burn up through Highway 16 and people's homes, and we just had an event in Western Rapid City. You know, it's hard to let that happen, and so we put forest fires out. And so what the timber industry does basically is we go and we don't go out and just randomly start cutting trees. It's the Forest Service lays it out, and they're trying to achieve a goal, you know, and whether they're trying to improve wildlife habitat or just watersheds or tending the forest to promote healthy forest health for years to come. We're thinning the forest, and we're doing that. That this forest that people come out and visit, most of it's been logged at one time or another. You know, it's just the way it is, and that beauty you see out there is because people are managing it and doing a good job. So when we're cutting a tree down, it might not be the prettiest thing to look at for a year, but it's a forest fire that comes and burns 10,000 acres of forest land isn't real pretty to look at either. And so we're out there trying to prevent some of that and trying to manage the forest so people can come out and recreate and enjoy it. And like I said earlier, we really feel like we're doing the right thing by being out there and trying to do what we do.
I don't know how corny this will sound, but people ask me what I do, but we're ranchers and timbermen, and it's not what we do, but it's who we are.